A detective in search of his sister, who has been missing for a decade, dives into a world of dark cults and ancient rituals. With each clue, the truth becomes more disturbing, revealing secrets that were never meant to be uncovered. My name is Michael, a professional detective, but my journey didn't start that way. My life took a turn in 2010, when my sister, Laura, mysteriously disappeared. This event catalyzed my decision to embrace the detective career, irreversibly transforming my life. My daily life is a constant battle against uncertainty and darkness. Every missing person case I take on reminds me of Laura's disappearance, a wound that never healed. In my work, I face human rot in its cruelest forms, from complex crimes to confrontations with powerful individuals hiding behind their influence and wealth. The search for Laura dominated my early years in the profession, an obsession that consumed every waking moment. I woke up every morning with the same question hammering in my mind. Where's Laura? Laura wasn't just my sister. She was my best friend. We grew up together, sharing secrets and dreams, laughing and making plans for the future on sunny afternoons in the park. She was a vibrant person, full of life and always ready to help others. But in the months leading up to her disappearance, Laura started showing strange behaviors. She spent long hours away from home without explanations, immersed in books about cults and ancient rituals. When she said she was doing field research for college in a small town known for its legends of secret cults, I didn't imagine it would be the last time I would see her. My life turned into a constant search for answers. I investigated every clue, interrogated friends, colleagues, and strangers, but never found even a shadow of her presence. It was as if she had evaporated from the world. The years passed, and the pain of loss became a constant presence, a cruel reminder of my impotence. Every case I solved, every criminal I brought to justice, nothing filled the void left by her absence. I buried myself in work, trying to find relief in the details of other cases, but deep down, all I wanted was a clue about Laura. Many nights, I found myself revisiting childhood memories, looking for some sign or hint that might have escaped. I remembered the guessing games, Laura's mischievous smile. The idea that she could be somewhere, needing help, didn't leave me in peace. My box of newspaper clippings, notes, and photos of Laura was a symbol of hope. But over time, this hope began to turn into despair. If Laura was dead, at least I wished for confirmation to give her a dignified burial and ease the weight on our shoulders. During my investigation, I visited the town where Laura had gone to do her research. I scoured every corner, talked to residents, explored abandoned places, but nothing concrete appeared. Eventually, I had to accept that moving on was necessary, even without answers. My emotional state oscillated between hope and despair, until one day, upon returning home after a long day of work, I found an anonymous letter in my mailbox. The paper was aged, and upon touching it, I felt a strange unease. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Laura is alive. My heart raced. Who would have sent this? Beside the letter, a photo of Laura, a little older than the last time I saw her. The image and the message sparked a mix of skepticism and curiosity. The photo showed Laura in an old church, next to an altar. In the background, disturbing images suggested the existence of a cult. My hands sweated as I held the image, my mind racing with wild thoughts. The letter wasn't signed by Laura, but by someone who clearly knew where she was. Who could this informant be? And why contact me now, so many years after her disappearance? The words in the letter were few, but carried immense weight. Laura is alive. Disturbing things are happening to her and around her. I know of your interest in finding answers about her disappearance. I can help. As proof, behind the photo is the address of the place where the photo was taken. Go there to confirm. I couldn't believe that after so many years, there was finally a concrete clue. The image of Laura inside that church, with sinister symbols in the background, renewed my hopes. Behind the photo, I found the church's address. It was a small town near the place where Laura had done her research. I hesitated for a moment, considering the possibility of involving the police. However, the personal nature of the case compelled me to investigate on my own. I couldn't entrust this task to anyone else. I prepared my things and drove to the mentioned location. The road was long and lonely, cutting through dense forests and abandoned fields. As I drove, my mind was a mix of thoughts and emotions. What would I find in that church? Was Laura really part of something so sinister? And if she was, how would I bring her back? The small town seemed deserted when I arrived. The streets were empty, and the few people I saw in the windows looked at me with distrust. The church was on the outskirts, an old and decrepit building, but clearly still in use. Its moss-covered walls and stained glass windows displayed ominous images. I parked the car and walked toward the entrance, feeling a chill down my spine. The door was closed, so I knocked, and a strange old man opened it. His eyes analyzed me with suspicion. I said I was curious about the church and would like to visit to see what it was like inside. The old man hesitated, but eventually let me in. The church's interior was even more disturbing. Black candles burned in iron holders, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. Occult symbols were engraved on various surfaces, and the air was thick with the smell of heavy incense. I walked slowly, absorbing all the details. I took a photo with my cell phone and compared it with the image I received. It was exactly the same place where Laura was in the photo. My heart raced as I realized she had indeed been there. Continuing my discreet investigation, I noticed several objects and relics that reinforced the feeling of being in a place dedicated to sinister practices. Old, worn books, filled with symbols and esoteric writings, were arranged on a side altar. I could see the main altar where Laura had been photographed, and everything fit together. After exploring a bit more, I thanked the old man and left the church, feeling a mix of dread and hope. I knew I was on the right path, but what would I find next? Leaving the church, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Finally, a concrete clue about Laura. She really seemed to be alive, at least when the photo was taken. I walked to the car with quick steps, my heart still racing from the adrenaline of the discovery. But I knew I couldn't stop there. I needed to find out more. I decided to talk to some town residents, hoping to get more information. The first house I visited was a small wooden residence with an untended garden in front. I knocked on the door, and a middle-aged woman answered. I explained that I was looking for information about the church and showed her the photo of Laura. Her eyes widened, but she quickly shut the door, muttering something about not getting involved with those things. I decided to talk to some town residents, hoping to get more information. The first house I visited was a small wooden residence with an untended garden in front. I knocked on the door, and a middle-aged woman answered. I explained that I was looking for information about the church and showed her the photo of Laura. Her eyes widened, but she quickly shut the door, muttering something about not getting involved with those things. The last house I visited belonged to a young woman with a small child. She seemed nervous as I spoke, constantly looking over her shoulder. I just want to know if anyone has seen my sister, I pleaded, showing the photo. She quickly glanced at the image, then at me. I saw her, she said softly, but I can't say much. They're always watching. Before I could ask more, she hurriedly closed the door. As I walked back to the car, my thoughts were a mix of hope and frustration. The answers I sought were so close, yet still out of reach. I got into the car and sat for a moment, trying to organize the flood of emotions. I had no idea what Laura's role in this situation was. Was she a victim of this cult? Or somehow, was she part of it? And why had someone decided to send me this letter now, after so many years with no leads? The possibility that Laura was alive filled me with hope, but doubts about what she might be facing haunted me. I drove back home, with the lonely road providing time to reflect on everything I had discovered. The townspeople's words echoed in my mind, and I knew the road ahead would be dangerous. I had no idea what awaited me, but one thing was certain: I wouldn't give up on finding Laura. Upon arriving home, my mind was buzzing with unanswered questions. I decided that the next step would be to study more about this cult and the church I visited. As soon as I arrived, I sat down at the computer and began searching for information. The initial searches didn't reveal much, but after a few hours, I found something that chilled my blood. The church was part of a cult called Cult of Ahriman, a sect dedicated to the Persian demon of darkness and destruction. Ahriman, also known as Angramanyu, was an ancient entity symbolizing chaos, death, and immortality through human sacrifices. The cult of Ahriman had roots dating back to ancient Persia, and its history was marked by bloody rituals and occult practices. The cult's main goal was to achieve absolute power and immortality, believing that offering human lives could please Ahriman and grant them these gifts. Over the centuries, the cult had spread and fragmented into small secret groups, each keeping the tradition of macabre ceremonies alive. The descriptions of the rituals I found were disturbing, detailing brutal sacrifices and dark invocations. The images I saw in the church began to make sense. The symbols, the altars, and even the heavy incense were part of the cult's practices. I continued researching and found reports of mysterious disappearances associated with the cult of Ahriman. Every time someone disappeared, the local community remained silent, driven by fear of reprisals. The connection to Laura became increasingly clear and terrifying. What could have led my sister to get involved with something so grim? And more importantly, was she doing this willingly or as a victim? A dark thought struck me. What if Laura was already dead, sacrificed by this cult? The doubt and uncertainty gnawed at me, making everything even stranger and more disturbing. As I read more about the cult, I found accounts of people who had escaped its clutches. These stories were terrifying and full of macabre details. Survivors spoke of horrendous rituals, where people were sacrificed in Ahriman's name. Some managed to escape, but many weren't so lucky. Each account increased my anxiety and fear for what might have happened to Laura. The doubts and questions kept coming, but one thing was clear. I was dealing with something very dangerous and real. After gathering more information about the cult, things cooled down, and I couldn't make significant progress in the investigation. There were no more clues about Laura, no direct indication about cult members, just a silence that seemed to swallow all my hopes. Life went on normally over the next few weeks, with the work routine becoming a sad backdrop to my frustration and restlessness. Then one day, upon arriving home, I found a new letter in my mailbox. This time, it was a normal letter, without the aged aspect, but again, without the sender's identification. This intrigued and apprehended me. With a racing heart, I took the letter and went inside, anxious and fearful of what was to come. With the new letter in hand, I sat at the kitchen table, hesitating for a moment before opening it. The initial words were direct and shocking. Laura has become the main leader of the sect over the years. She is becoming increasingly cruel. I want to leave the sect, but I don't know how. I'm sending this letter because you might be able to help me. My heart sank. The idea that Laura was not only alive, but had also ascended to a position of power in a satanic cult was almost impossible to accept. The letter continued to reveal horrifying details about Laura's participation in the cult and her importance in it. She was a central figure, almost revered by other members. The sender described satanic rituals and the cult's activities in graphic detail. Esoteric symbols drawn with blood, chants in ancient languages, and black garments adorned with demonic inscriptions. Every word painted a darker picture than the last. My mind struggled to reconcile these descriptions with the image of the loving and kind sister I knew. Along with the letter was concrete proof that Laura was alive. A recent video showed her giving a speech from a pulpit, praying to the demon Ahriman. Her eyes shone with a frightening intensity, and her voice was full of conviction. It was impossible to deny it was Laura. There was also a photo of her, visibly older, beside a sacrifice, the head of an animal, probably a goat. The image seemed recent, further reinforcing the disturbing reality of what she had become. Seeing these proofs, I was at a loss for what to do or believe. The idea that my sister Laura could be leading a satanic cult was devastating. I didn't want to involve the police, fearing that this might result in her arrest if everything was true. But the evidence was there, raw and undeniable. I spent hours reviewing the video and photo, trying to find some rational explanation, some flaw that could prove it was all a hoax. I desperately searched for clues that might indicate where the video and photo were taken, or any detail that would lead me to Laura's whereabouts. But there were no flaws, just a harsh and cold reality. Despite all the information, there was no concrete lead I could follow directly. I was lost, not knowing where to look or who to turn to. In the following days, my mind couldn't rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Laura's face in the video, heard her voice chanting those macabre hymns. My productivity at work plummeted. I turned down new cases and couldn't progress on the ones already in progress, as my mind was completely taken by Laura's situation and the cult. I was on the verge of giving up when a few days later, I received another letter. The envelope was identical to the previous one, without the sender's identification. My heart raced again. Perhaps this was the key to discovering where Laura was and what was really happening. I opened the new letter with trembling hands, my breath heavy with anticipation of what I would find. Inside, there was a photo of Laura, this time with other cult members in a place that looked like a church. The black candles, esoteric symbols, and ominous atmosphere were unmistakable. The letter's text was even more disturbing. They are about to hold a meeting with important members. There will be a new human sacrifice. The idea that Laura could be involved in something so horrible devastated me. But the letter continued, revealing crucial details. I'm revealing this because I no longer think it's right what's happening. The letter said, maybe you, Michael, can do something to stop it. My heart raced as I read these words. The sense of helplessness began to be replaced by a new determination. The anonymous sender was giving me a chance, an opportunity to intervene and save not just the sacrificial victim, but perhaps also my sister. The letter provided the ritual's location and time, giving me concrete information to act. I decided I would go alone. I couldn't risk involving others and complicating the situation further. I packed a backpack with some basic tools, a flashlight, a knife, a camera to record any evidence, binoculars, and a fully charged cell phone. I also took a gun, something essential for my safety as a detective. That night, I drove to the location mentioned in the letter. The trip was long and exhausting, with every mile increasing the tension and anxiety. The fact that my car was electric helped, as it made no noise, allowing me to approach discreetly. I arrived with the headlights off, parking the car at a safe distance. The environment was cold, and the starless sky seemed to heighten the sense of isolation. The church was an imposing structure, surrounded by high walls, making it a safer and more discreet location for the rituals. I approached on foot, trying to make as little noise as possible, while the wind cut through my face, and the distant sound of nocturnal animals echoed in the distance. Upon nearing the church, I realized the letter hadn't exaggerated. The place was surrounded by hooded figures, all moving silently like shadows. I used the binoculars to get a better view of the scene from a distance. The church's interior glowed with candlelight, and the distant sound of disturbing chants filled the air. My heart was pounding so hard I feared it might be heard. I knew I had to be careful and quick. This was my chance to save Laura and stopped the sacrifice. As I watched, I noticed a familiar figure among the hooded ones. It was Laura, without a doubt. She was at the center, directing the ritual with an authority that gave me chills. The letter's words echoed in my mind. She is becoming increasingly cruel. The sight of Laura, my sister, leading such a macabre ritual was almost unbearable. However, I had to stay calm and find a way to intervene without being detected. Every second counted, and any mistake could be fatal for me and anyone else involved. Looking more closely at the environment, I noticed an empty chair in the center of the hall. Something about the way it was positioned intrigued me, as if it was waiting for someone. I assumed it was for the sacrificial victim. The letter's words came back to me. "You can do something to stop it." I needed to find a way to save this victim and understand Laura's role in this horrific ritual. As I watched, I saw Laura stop the ritual and look in my direction. My heart nearly stopped. She began walking towards me, and dread took hold of me. It was clear I had been discovered. I didn't know what to do. Should I run or stay? My muscles froze, and I remained where I was, outside the church, looking through the window. When she got closer, my discomfort increased. Finally, our eyes met, and her face lit up with a mix of surprise and what seemed to be longing. "Michael," she whispered, her voice laden with emotion. "I knew you would come." My instinct told me to run, but her words and the look in her eyes kept me still. Not knowing how to react, I put away my gun and nodded. "Laura, we need to talk," I said, trying to stay calm. She nodded, seeming tranquil and serene. "Of course, Michael. We can talk inside." As we walked towards the church entrance, my heart beat strongly, mixing fear and hope. I thought maybe if I could understand what was happening, I could get her out of there. Each step was a torment, but I continued to follow her, believing we were going somewhere I could finally get answers. Laura was dressed in a long black robe, adorned with occult symbols. Her demeanor was calm, almost serene, which starkly contrasted with the situation. Other cult members, also in similar attire, watched us from a distance. Some seemed curious, others maintained a stern and vigilant posture. "Michael, I've waited so long for this moment," Laura said softly as we walked. "There are so many things you need to understand." Her voice was affectionate, which left me even more confused. As we walked down the dark church corridor, I tried to appeal to the Laura I knew. "Laura, why did you do this? What happened to you? Why did you disappear?" She paused for a moment, looked at me, and smiled with a look of happiness. "I found a new life, Michael. This is my path." Her words hung in the air, leaving me even more bewildered. As we were about to turn the corner, I felt a violent blow to the head. The world went dark, and I fell to the floor, feeling consciousness slip away. I woke up with a searing pain in my head, trying to understand where I was. My eyes adjusted to the dim light, and I realized I was tied to the chair I had seen earlier. Terror took hold of me as the reality set in. I was the offering for that night. Laura stood beside me, looking at me with a cold and determined gaze. "Sorry, Michael," she said, "but the sacrifice needs to be someone special." Panic and disbelief overwhelmed me as I struggled futilely against the bonds. Terror turned into crushing despair. "Laura, please don't do this," I pleaded, my voice trembling with fear and pain. "We can leave here. We can find another way." But she only shook her head, smiling sadly. "It's too late for that, Michael. This is our path now." She stepped away and signaled to the other members, who began to approach, ready to complete the ritual.